much like many of the kids that we see in our schools, my mind is everywhere. I don't have an attention problem. I have an attention problem to everything. I'm always thinking. When I looked out in the audience and I saw the red shirts, and right away I reflected back to how powerful Minnesota Reading Corps is, and Math Corps, and the kindergarten reps, and how much we appreciate having you around. When deciding what to talk about, when it comes to literacy, where do you begin? Where do you start? What do you share? And I looked at the tagline for the flyer that was out, and it said, "We can all support young readers, whether we are involved in a school, a business, a family, or a community." And that all part couldn't be more true. Regardless of what your role is, where you work, what you do, whether you work, you don't work, everyone has an impact on how children do in school, how children grow up, what type of life they're going to lead. And for you in the stage, I apologize that you do a lot of looking over your shoulder, but I'm going to intersperse some quotes throughout the slides. I'm not typically one that uses slides. However, I know for the different learners in the audience, you probably would appreciate that. And later on, it'll give you a visual cue of something I might have said that you can refer to later by looking at the sheet. I don't typically share a lot of statistics and facts, not because I don't agree with them, but I think most of what I'm going to share, you know in your heart. You already know this. You're going to know that children that struggle with reading quite possibly come from a home that doesn't have access to quite a bit of literature or books at that child's level. You heard a comment about poverty. Although it's easy to generalize, when you see someone that's coming from a household that is a lower income, that doesn't always mean they're going to struggle. When you see, and we're all adults here, so I'll try to keep them not too colorful examples, but if you see a child that comes with a silver spoon out of every orifice, every place you could possibly imagine, they've got everything going for them, that doesn't always mean they're going to succeed or do well with reading. So one thing I would caution you as I kind of go through this is that when you see statistics, it doesn't mean it's a certainty. Some of our children do the best in school, come from what general society might generalize as not a good home. Poor, tattooed, don't go to church. I have tattoos, I do go to church. But as you look at this quote behind you, that doesn't mean anything. Not until you look at who you are and what you are. So I'm going to share with you some statistics, and a lot of it focuses on income, but I think we need to be careful to remember that it's just one piece. I came from a family that my parents worked hard. We didn't have all the silver spoons. I get emotional when I speak, so that's probably why they brought me up here to see if they could get me going. But I think it's just, and I'll get into it, but I think it's careful, again, when you see statistics, they're generalizations. It doesn't point to a 100% indicator of what a child will face and what they will see. I like this quote because children learn more from what you are than what you teach. So for example, why did I not wear a suit and tie? One generalization I guess I can make is that in my role when I work with families that really struggle, they don't want to come into my office and hear the gentleman sitting in the pristine suit and the tie tell them what they need to do better. They want somebody to listen to them and say they understand where they're at in their life and give them some things that they can actually do to help their child. Say for example, we know that the research says reading 50 to 20 minutes a night with a child has immense possibilities and gains. If you're a single parent working multiple jobs, you might not have 20 minutes. But if you can do 5 minutes, do 5. If you can do 2 minutes, do 2. If you can sneak the reading in while you're doing grocery lists and shopping and cooking, sneak it in. But I think sometimes we get caught up in what we look like and who is saying it. I wore jeans because I like jeans and a Nassau shirt because I learned early on a passion for science. And how did I learn that? Through reading. I still remember the book my mom had bought. It was this dusty, old, dirty science. It was way beyond my reading level. It had maybe a couple handwritten pictures in it. And then I still remember the smell of the book, the look of the book, and that was one of the first things that really got me geared up toward solar system, sun, moon. So although you might look at it and say, why didn't you dress up tonight? I did dress up. This is me. Like I said, tattoos, church, Nassau. You learn a lot about, I got a family, I have 4 kids. We're busy all the time. We know the research. My wife's a kindergarten teacher. I'm a principal. We know the research. Read every night, read every night, read every night. We don't read every night. We do the best that we can in the time that we have. If we have 5 minutes, we get 5 minutes in. If we have time at the end, I'll show a video of my oldest daughter reading to her younger sister who then fell asleep. That's reading. It's a way to divide and conquer. I did talk a little bit about NASA. I can't tell you enough how many doors in my life have opened through the simply loving to read. One of my earliest memories of reading, well, not earliest I guess, but my mother. How many of you like romance novels? Generalizing, men don't typically like romance novels, nor do I. When my mom would take me to Wisconsin in the summer, she'd drive. She's a very avid reader. She would explain to me where she had left off in the book, And then for the next hour and a half to 2 hours, I would read to her. And I can't imagine but thinking that I probably wasn't the strongest reader at first, but she still had the patience to let me do that. And as I got older, I can imagine for her it was great because she could read, but she's a much more avid reader than even I am. She reads for enjoyment, I read for learning, which are both reading. Probably wouldn't be doing my job as a keynote speaker if I didn't share some facts. I'm gonna go through these. I'll go through these really quick, because like I said, a lot of the times I think your gut will tell you and agree with you. Having books in the home is twice as important as the father's education level. The single most significant factor influencing a child's early educational success is an introduction to books and being read to at home prior to beginning at school. And I would go even further to say prior to going to preschool. I would say even in utero. So if we have those that were earning their baby step certificates, you can read even when baby's inside. Children who struggle in vain with reading in first grade soon decide they neither like it nor want to read. I've heard many people say that they don't like to read, but I have never met someone that truly didn't like to read. But I've met many people that don't know how to pick the right book. Either picking a book that they enjoy to read, or picking a book that they can read. If you have a hand, or enough for 5 fingers, you have enough to decide if a book is easy enough or too hard to read. So for example, as an educator, I can give you all sorts of different systems, assessments, and tools that will tell you what book is just right for a child. But for most families, it will boil down to these 5 things. Pick up a book and start reading it. If by the end of that page, you have any fingers left up, you can read it. So for example, I start reading the book and I make a mistake or can't read a word. See another word I can't read, see another word I can't read, another word, probably pick an easier book to read. If I have 1 finger up at the end, it's probably going to be pretty tough. If I get at the end of that page and I have 5 fingers up, it's probably going to be a book that I can read very well. One of the slides toward the end that we probably won't get to, I wanted to talk a little bit about being purposeful and knowing your audience. Be authentic, get to know people. When someone says they don't like to read, find out why. I had a bad experience in school. If school is over for you, that excuse no longer proves valid. You're out of school. Do you like to work on cars? Do you use a car manual? That's a love for reading. Do you like to go hunting? Did you have to read a catalog to order something? That's a love for reading. So for that person, for me to say a benchmark assess that child to find their level, they could care less. But if I said if you have 5 fingers and you can pick up a book, you can find out if it's just right or too easy. I'm not going to read the last one because you can read some of those too as you go through. A child who reads will be an adult who thinks. Reading is such a beautiful cure for ignorance. You're going to see a couple graphics to that later. And ignorance doesn't have to be a bad thing, simply not knowing something. But when you not know and choose not to know, read. A couple of these that I wanted to read because again, you can read these on your own and I can share later. 80% of preschool and after-school programs serving low-income populations have no age-appropriate books for their children. 61% of low-income families have no books at all in their homes for their children. I bolded the last statement, not that it's necessarily a fact, but I really liked the quote. It says, Urging young children to read more when there is little available to read makes as much sense as urging starving people to eat when no food is available. So telling someone to read more when they don't have access to books is as akin to telling someone who's starving, eat more food when there's no food. How do you find books? Originally we talked where it said all of us are part of this. If you've ever seen a little red bookshelf, that is a way to place a bookshelf in a place for people to grab books. If I own and operate a business, that might be something I can provide in my lobby or entrance. A little red bookshelf with books that people can drop off and exchange. We have them in schools usually, or places to grab books. Toward the end, I'll show you pictures of my house. Don't tell my wife I shared them because we didn't clean up ahead of time.